On today's show, we're going to talk about whether or not Arthur Smith is returning in 2024 as ESPN put out a new report with some of their findings and what they're hearing and whatnot. So we'll check this out and I'll give you my take on the whole situation. So let's jump right into it. Let's see what Jeremy Fowler had to say in a write-up with Dan Graziano where they talked about what they're hearing, what the buzz is on the streets in Atlanta. And he says, it seems like a job could open in this division depending on how things play out. The sense I get after asking around is that Arthur Smith is safe in Atlanta, barring a late season collapse. So my initial reaction to this is somewhat good. I mean, I think bringing back Arthur Smith is the right decision. There have been improvements. I think this team and this offense and all together have been getting better and better as the year has gone on. And as for his 3-year tenure so far, it has improved season in and season out, despite maybe not seeing that translate to the wins on the scoreboard. But all in all, I know that this fan base is relatively split on Art, and I'm pretty much in the Arthur Smith defender camp. I'm not the biggest Art Smith defender out there because he definitely does things that irk me and some poor decision-making at key times. But by and large, I'll say I'm a Arthur Smith defender out there before I'm an Arthur Smith hater. Now, one thing that Art has clearly gotten through his head the last couple of weeks is you have really good players. Maybe I should use them and actually lean into all the fantasy football owners out there that for whatever reason he decided to screw over for the first half of the season. Because you look at Drake London's stats since the bye, 271 yards, 23 targets. Like the 271 yards is nice and all, but how about the 23 targets? Like Drake London this year, for as talented and as gifted as he is, has what, 2 games above 10 targets? I mean, that is criminal. Get 5 the ball more. And speaking of getting players the ball more, Kyle Pitts, he's starting to see a bigger role in this offense. He's got 16 targets, 9 grabs, and 130 yards, along with a touchdown this past game since the bye in the last 3 weeks. And of course, you've got another top 10 selection who's getting more work. Bijan Robinson since the bye, 44 carries, 178 yards, averaging 4 yards a pop, 112 through the air, and 3 total touchdowns. And if I stretch those numbers back to the Cardinals game the week before the bye, when Bijan went off and had the most amount of carries in a single game so far this year, you would see a lot bigger numbers on screen. My biggest beef, I should say, with Arthur Smith is you don't get 3 top 10 picks and keep your job very often. You're picking top 10, which the first one was not his fault, right? He was hired after Dan Quinn was fired midseason. But the last 2 years, you've got a top 10 pick. And right now, you're teetering on getting another top 10 pick to keep your job after getting the lottery tickets time after time after time again and selecting really talented, skilled players, not going old-fashioned, boring offensive lineman, defensive lineman route, but guys who can get butts in seats like Kyle Pitts and Drake London and Bijan Robinson. For you to have 3 top 10 selections and still have your job after picking in the top 10 that many times and not using those top 10 selections, that's a war crime. I mean, that is an absolute tragedy, right? You don't get to have top 10 selections, keep your job very often. But if you do, you better use those top 10 selections. So I'm not quite sure if Arthur Smith decided, hey, I'm going to be, outsmarting and out-coaching the opposition by going with Tyler Algier and Jonnu Smith more because I think it's going to be Pitts and London and Robinson. Yeah, joke's on you, Art. I mean, no one is going to be afraid of Tyler Algier week in and week out. But Bijan Robinson's a guy that's going to keep opposing defensive coordinators up. So if you have those top 10 selections, you better use the hell out of them as long as you still have a job. But let me know, should Atlanta keep Arthur Smith? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Sitting at 6-7, we really got to see how the rest of the season plays out. And I ultimately think Atlanta's on path to probably finish 8-9, 9-8, which would be better than another 7-win season, knock on wood. However, if things do start to spiral out, well, for those of you sickos out there wondering, all right, I'm typing N for no, and now I want to know, what if things do get out of control, right? What if this team does not win another game? They finish with 6 wins. Arthur Smith loses the locker room. Should Atlanta look for a new head coach? Well, we'll talk about some options for that in just a moment. But today's show is sponsored by Game Time. you guys should not have to worry when you're trying to buy tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. If you're trying to catch an upcoming Falcons game or you want to see another sporting event in your area, Game Time is the place to visit first. Now, what I love about Game Time specifically is the ability to get last-minute tickets for the lowest price. There's nothing better than a spur-of-the-moment boys trip or something like that. And with Game Time, you can pull that off without breaking the bank in the process. So they're obsessed with finding ways to help you guys save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins. It's the place to find last-minute seats. So do yourself a favor, download the Game Time app. Once you download it, enter this promo code, Falcons Chat. When you do that, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, but again, download the Game Time app, redeem that code Falcons Chat for $20 off your first purchase. And because I love you guys so much, I put that link down in the comments and description of today's video. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now, in this article from Jeremy Fowler and Dan Graziano, they did mention some coordinators out there that are going to be on teams looking for a new head coach's radar. They've got Lions OC Ben Johnson and Eagles OC Brian Johnson as two of the most popular names currently. They also have Brian Callahan, who's been the OC for the Bengals, and he's gotten interest the last couple of cycles. Press Taylor has been the play caller in Jacksonville the last 2 years, kind of, I would say on and off, but maybe not as frequent as some other play callers. But he has put up really good numbers for that Jags offense. The Texans OC, Bobby Slowick, he's getting some attraction just because of how great C.J. Stroud has looked this year. But Frank Smith, the Miami Dolphins offensive coordinator, was with the Chargers before coming down to South Beach. He is an interesting guy to keep an eye on. Here's what Jeremy Fowler wrote on Frank Smith. One coach who isn't a household name but will likely get traction is Miami offensive coordinator Frank Smith. The Kyle Shanahan / Mike McDaniel offense is coveted right now, and Smith is a key part of Miami's top-ranked unit. I mean, just for all of my fanboys out there, this is some real football porn. Bijan Robinson and Shanahan / McDaniel's run system. That's why you pick Bijan top 10, is because he is an extremely gifted and talented running back, and those guys actually don't come around every single year, at least as good as Bijan is. But to put him in a system designed to benefit running backs. I mean, we have seen how prolific Christian McCaffrey has been in San Francisco, and he was great in Carolina beforehand, but he's even better right now in the Bay Area. Can you imagine Bijan in a system like that? Again, I'm okay with Arthur Smith coming back next year, assuming the wheels do not fall off the wagon right now, but I wonder how many teams out there wish they fired their head coach so they could hire Kyle Shanahan, even if things weren't going all that bad, right? Go back in time when Shanahan was hired by the 49ers. I mean, back in 2017, it's been that long. So that's just something to keep an eye on. Now, as for some defensive coordinators, we're going to kind of just move along past Dan Quinn. I feel like that might not be a good idea for Atlanta. Raheem Morris, Lou Anarumo, Mike McDonald, he's the DC in Baltimore. He's been getting some attraction as an up-and-coming guy. Ejiro Evero, the DC for the Panthers. Brian Flores, we know, had some head coaching experience. Did a okay job, I think, to put it, short and sweet in Miami. Definitely a lot of ups and a lot of downs. But Brian Flores has done a tremendous job up with Minnesota Vikings. I'm not quite sure if he's going to jump right back into the head coaching saddle just 1 year later, though. However, one name to keep an eye on is Ejiro Evero. This is the Carolina Panthers defensive coordinator. You can look at his defensive stats from the two teams he has coached the last 2 years. You're also going to see him firsthand this upcoming Sunday as Atlanta squares off with Carolina. Now, the raw numbers, they don't really jump out to you, right? Last year for the Broncos, 21 points allowed. The defense in Carolina right now giving up 26 points per game. Total yards is relatively low. I mean, for a team that has won one game, you probably didn't expect them to be a top 5 total yards defense, but they're not really generating a whole lot of pressure. 20 sacks on the year. That's dead last in the NFL. 9 takeaways, dead last in the NFL. So he did a really good job, I thought, last year with the Broncos, given how big of a disaster that was with Nathaniel Hackett and Russell Wilson in year one. The defense was the only good thing going on in the Mile High City. And I think that's continued over in the Queen City as well, where the Panthers are an absolute dumpster fire. But the defense actually isn't all that bad. So let me know, what kind of head coach do you prefer? Offense or defense? If I could have one thing added to my tombstone for free, because I think they pay you by the letter, it would be hiring coaches in the NFL just because they're an offensive-minded coach or a defensive-minded coach doesn't mean they don't know how the other side of the football works. Like, there is this overwhelming, huge fallacy amongst NFL fans that if you hire an OC, he doesn't know how to run a defense. You don't get to be an offensive coordinator or a defensive coordinator in the NFL without having a pretty good idea of what the other 11 players are doing, right? So even if you do hire a defensive coordinator, I think there is this overall stigma of, well, the offense is going to suck now. That's not true. I mean, Dan Quinn's offenses in Atlanta were not bad. Sure, having Shanahan definitely helped and whatnot, but let's not act like they couldn't move the ball at all. So I just think there is this overwhelming thought that if you hire one, the other side's going to suck. And right now the flashy trend is to go offense. And maybe I'm just zigging while everyone else is zagging, but I think there is just way too much pressure to go offense because DCs don't know how to run an offense. I think that's probably over-dramatized. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed our coverage, consider subscribing to the channel. It's completely free, and we'll keep you guys in the loop all season long.